The Buccaneers look to move to 3-0 for the first time since 2005. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome into this live Friday preview episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as editor-in-chief of the 813.tv, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. For that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Keys to the game and predictions coming up in a little bit, but let's start with kind of some big news here around the Buccaneers. And that is that there appears to be an outside chance that Vita Vea is going to try to give it a go this week. So Rock Riley dropped the tweet on the 813 account on Twitter at the 813TV that Vita Vea came out after special teams practice and was going to test out that knee. Looks like he was limited on Friday, and Todd Bowles told the media after practice that Vita did some things in practice and that he's gotten a lot better. So they're going to wait and see how he's feeling on Sunday. So it looks like Vita Vea is a true game time decision against the Denver Broncos. The same, however, cannot be said about Antoine Winfield Jr., Kalijah Kancey, and Luke Goedeke, all of whom are going to be out on Sunday. This is a problem for the Bucs. They've been able to overcome the defensive injuries, and that doesn't mean that Kalijah Kancey and Antoine Winfield Jr. aren't important. Obviously, they are, and the defense will be leaps and bounds better with them on the field, but it's the Goedeke concussion that creates some worry. Baker was beaten half to death, and the run game was absolutely abysmal against Detroit without Goedeke on the field. If the Bucs are going to win on Sunday, Liam Cohen has to have a better attack plan than he did last week in order to get Justin Schools some help. Look, all of you know that I am a Cade Otton guy, but this offense does not need him to be a weapon in the passing game right now. They can still use him in the pass game, but they need to line up with Otton or Kieft on that right side and help with the blocking. This team cannot afford to be in a situation where all of a sudden they're playing from behind and giving Bo Nix and the offense confidence that they can steal a win at Raymond James Stadium. Rachaad and Bucky should be huge weapons for the offense this week against a bad Broncos run defense. I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute, but that will come to a screeching halt before it even begins if there isn't a plan in place to help School on the right side of this offensive line. I have confidence in this defense, and the backups that had to take the field last week against the Detroit Lions were fantastic. Greg Gaines was great when Vita Vea came off the field. Christian Izien was fantastic on the back end of the defense. Servassier Dennis played out of his mind. William Golston has been good through 2 weeks. The glaring issue with these injuries that have piled up for the Buccaneers was Justin School. And I don't mean to continue to pile on him. I criticized his performance earlier this week on this show. I made him my dud of the week on Inside the 813. But until he shows that there were adjustments and improvements made, it's hard to have faith and belief that he can go out there and shut down an opposing pass rusher or that he can open lanes and spring running backs for solid gains. Zach Allen can cause problems for this Buccaneers offense, and he's a guy that can get in the backfield and have multiple sacks, or at the very least, disrupt a lot of plays. They cannot have that again this week. Liam Cohen talked about maybe bringing in an extra lineman on first and second down, but then on those passing situations on third down, the defensive line and the pass rushers aren't going to face as much resistance if there's not that additional lineman. Cohen said that he didn't want to have that additional lineman on third down because that takes away a potentially eligible receiver on those plays. So Baker is going to have to get the ball out of his hands really quick on third downs. So you're going to look for those short, quick passes to Chris Godwin, where he's been able to get a lot of yards after catch. You're going to look for those short, quick passes to Bucky Irving or Rachaad White in space. You're going to look to get the ball out of your hands quickly to Mike Evans, who's a big body and can box out Pat Surtain and try to pick up the first downs. But the opening series against Denver is going to tell us a lot about how the Bucs plan on keeping Baker upright and getting Rachaad and Bucky going, in terms of how they're going to line up. How often is an additional lineman used? How often is there a tight end out there that just stays in the block? That could also potentially lead to, some tight end screens. We saw the Bucs try a tight end screen for K-Dot last week against the Lions. The ball was a little high. It fell incomplete. But if Liam Cohen keeps sending K-Dot out there on the right side of that line and he keeps staying into block, then all of a sudden he sneaks out a little bit for a quick little dump off that could pick up a quick 5, 6, 7 yards. This is a team that the Buccaneers should beat and a team that should help them get the run game off the ground. But not having Luke Goedeke out there is a huge blow for the second straight week for this Buccaneers offense. I cannot stress enough how important Luke Goedeke is to this offense, to the protection of Baker Mayfield, how they're going to be able to operate as an offense with Justin School out there. We saw it against Detroit. They struggled through long stretches, and I'm rooting for School. I really, really am. Todd Bowles said that they might do a rotation. I don't know if that's any better. You want these guys to get into a rhythm and to be out there together. Doing a rotation is going to cause other problems. So, I want School to have sat down, watched that Detroit film, worked with his coaches, worked with his teammates, talked to Cody Mauch, talked to Tristan Wirfs, talked to Robert Hainsey, who's kind of that swing tackle backup, and try to correct some of the issues that we saw against Detroit last week. Gonna jump into the live chat real quick. You guys have been blowing it up. My goodness, it is great to see all of you in here on a Friday afternoon. Richard in the chat says, Bucs have injuries, but be glad they're not long-term injuries. Absolutely. We know Antoine is coming back. We know that Cansey's coming back. We know at some point Goedeke will come back. We know that even if Vita is inactive for this week, he will be coming back. The fact that he was limited in practice tells us that he's closer to coming back than dealing with a 2, 3, 4 week long injury. Those are all absolutely huge. Sean in the chat says, we're doing good, guys. We will figure it out. Like I said at the top of the show, and some of you weren't in here for it, the Bucs are looking to go 3-0 for the first time since 2005. That was on the legs of Cadillac Williams and his historic start in his rookie season, where the Bucs actually ended up going 4-0 to start that year. They didn't go 3-0 at any other point during the Gruden era, but they didn't even go 3-0 during the Brady era. And Baker Mayfield has the chance to lead this offense to a 3-0 start for the first time in nearly 2 decades. That would be massive. And you take a look at what the Saints are doing. They get a questionable Philadelphia defense this week in their home dome, where it is so tough to play. The Saints could be looking at going to 3-0, which is, it's a complete shock to, I think, just about everybody. Even Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, he picked the Saints to finish 3rd in the division. He didn't think that they were going to get off to this kind of start. So a 3-0 start for this Buccaneers team is paramount before they head in to this big stretch. I have the offensive and defensive keys to the game. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. The Bucs are 6.5-point home favorites against the Denver Broncos this weekend with an over-under of 39.5. And now they've moved up to second in the race for the NFC South in terms of those odds. They're trailing the Saints, but sitting at plus 195. Meanwhile, those New Orleans Saints are 2.5-point home favorites against the Eagles. The Atlanta Falcons are 3-point home underdogs to the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Andy Dalton-led Panthers are 6.5-point road underdogs to the Raiders. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to download America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. I've talked about it already this week, but running the ball is the way to really wear down this Denver defense and win this game. I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute, but the new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts. You get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. My offensive key to the game this week is feed Rachaad White and Bucky Irving early, often, all day long. The Broncos are allowing the 4th fewest passing yards per game in the NFL, and their scoring defense is 11th, allowing just 19.5 points per game. However, they're allowing over 190 rushing yards per game, thanks in large part to the unsure tackling of their linebackers and safeties. Getting Rachaad and Bucky to the second level of that defense is what's going to give the Bucs a chance to blow this game wide open. Both of those running backs are so quick and so elusive that if they get into the second level against shaky tacklers, they are going to make those guys miss, and 4 and 5 yard gains turn into 20+ yard explosives. You could be looking at a long touchdown run as well if things get left up to the safeties to make touchdown saving tackles. But much like last year, the Bucs can adopt the run through the air strategy. The biggest key is getting Rachaad and Bucky the ball as often as possible in the second level of the defense. I don't care if it's a run. I don't care if it's a pass. I would prefer it to be a run to start to get this run game going. But getting the ball in the hands of these two playmakers is where the Bucs offense can make the magic happen, and it's where the Bucs are going to get big chunks of yards. If the run isn't working the way that it should, just get some dump offs and some swing passes out to those two guys so that they can make plays with their legs. You know, if you thought that Baker putting Anzalone on skates last week was fun, get these two running backs the ball out in the flat or on short dump offs over the middle, and then just sit back and enjoy the show that the two of them are going to put on. The running backs for the Buccaneers have not been nearly as involved as they should in the first 2 weeks, especially in the passing game. And last week was certainly an outlier when it comes to Rachaad's usage in the passing game. 1 catch for 5 yards. That is not a Rachaad White stat line. But having those threats make plays early in the game forces the defense to play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. Then all of a sudden you're opening up those passing lanes for Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Jalen McMillan. It won't work quite as well the other way around. On Sunday, we should be talking about Rachaad and Bucky combining for at least 50% of the touches on the offensive side of the ball. Let's flip the sides now and let's talk about defense. And this one falls on the shoulders of Yaya Diaby and then to a lesser extent, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka and Servassier Dennis. The Broncos are without starting right tackle and captain Mike McGlinchey. So if this Buccaneers team does not rack up sacks, I'm going to start to change my tune about the potential of this pass rush. Yes, things are going to be different when Kalijah Kancey is back. We don't know if or how much Vita Vea might play, but in this one, it shouldn't matter. If Diaby, Dennis, and JTS cannot overpower Frank Crum with their speed and their strength, then what are we even doing? I want to see Yaya lining up on the left side of the defense at times. I want to see Servassier Dennis going hard up the middle with Diaby taking attention away from that right side, chewing up some of those resources on the right side of the Broncos offensive line. I want to see Todd Bowles dialing up pressures and force the Broncos to use every single available resource they have, paving the way for these blitzing players like Dennis, like Levante David, like Jordan Whitehead, like Christian Izien, like Tyke Smith. Let's send him on a slot blitz, but you got to chew up those resources. Chris Braswell, I'm calling for you. Now is the time to make a splash play. He had one tackle in week 1. He had one tackle in week 2. Todd Bowles was singing this guy's praises, talking about the improvements that he was seeing day after day. I need to see it on a Sunday. I like Braswell's intangibles. I like his raw talent, but he needs to have a splash play or two in this game to make Sean Payton take notice of another pass rush threat that he now has to scheme around and worry about. If Braswell can get stonewalled one-on-one, then Sean Payton is going to be able to game plan Diaby out of this game. You cannot have that, not this week. Bo Nix has 0 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions. He has been sacked 4 times. The Buccaneers should have 4 sacks in this game alone. Nix has been pressured on 24% of his dropbacks and has a 57% completion percentage on the season. He has been blitzed 18 times this season through 2 weeks. Blitz him 18 times in this game. Put all the pressure that you can on Bo Nix and rattle him early, because once he starts to get rattled and he starts to get those happy feet, that's when he makes some of his biggest mistakes. The Buccaneers secondary showed that they can withstand the injuries and make plays against a far better group of offensive playmakers than what Denver has to offer. You knock him down, you knock him around, you sack him right from the jump to set the tone that it's going to be a long day for that quarterback in the Florida Heat. All of that starts with Yaya Diaby getting going and taking advantage of a weakened Broncos offensive line. I can only defend Yaya Diaby for so long, and it's not like he hasn't made plays. He has gotten key pressures in key situations, but in this one, you have to finish the plays. You have to get Bo Nix on the ground, get a strip sack, force them into 3rd and 17, 3rd and 18 because of a big sack that you had on 2nd down. Press the issue, then allow Zion McCollum, Jamel Dean, Jordan Whitehead, Christian Izien to make plays in the secondary, take that ball away, and set your offense up for success. Going to jump into the live chat again. I see Richard reacting to something that G Vegas said. G Vegas says Godwin getting that yak this Sunday. And then Richard jumps in, Yakineers. Let's go, G Vegas. I love both of those. And yet Godwin, I can't remember exactly now. I looked it up earlier in the week, but Godwin is either number 1 or number 2 in the NFL in yards after catch through 2 weeks this season. He's been an absolute monster. I promised you guys last week that my key for the offense cannot be to feed Chris Godwin every single week. But of course, that's going to be a huge part of this offensive scheme. Continue to feed Godwin on 3rd downs, continue to feed him when Mike Evans is drawing safeties away with that bracket coverage and you have safeties collapsing on him to double team him. Keep feeding Godwin. It's worked through 2 weeks. It should work again this week, but I also really desperately need to see Rachaad and Bucky far more involved in this one than they were last week against Detroit. Christopher says Nelson needs to sit down and give the young guys more reps. Nelson's been playing pretty well, actually. I'm not going to say that he needs to sit down when he's playing better than some of the other guys. You get the reps that you earn. And if Nelson is earning more reps and he gives the Bucs a better chance to make a play on defense, I'm not going to call for him to sit in those situations. The way Braswell can get on the field more is when he is on the field, make a play, make a splash. That's going to get you more opportunity because you're going to show that you can get the job done. Richard says this might be a big JTS game. JTS tends to line up on the left side of the defense more often than Yaya Diaby does. So JTS is going to definitely be a beneficiary of Frank Crum getting the start at right tackle. He needs to make a splash play early on, but it's up to Todd Bowles to move these guys around. We've seen them move around throughout the season so far, but I need a heavy dose of Yaya Diaby on the left side of the defense to go up against the Broncos backup right tackle. It is prediction time. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players leaves in the first half and doesn't return. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, easy, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. It's super simple to play. You just pick more or less than a player's stat projections and then watch the winnings roll in. It's not you against thousands of other fantasy players and charts, just you against the numbers. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, all one word, on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play 5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Wrapping things up here on a live Friday preview edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And all right, the Bucs and Broncos face off at 1 o'clock inside Raymond James Stadium, where the Bucs are 6.5-point favorites. And just a reminder for those that didn't stay all the way until the end of WTSP Wednesday, I will not be watching the game live. I should be home around 3:30 or 4 o'clock Sunday afternoon after my son's debut with his new hockey team. I will immediately dive into the game once I get home, and I will go live as soon as possible. Insiders, I'm going to text you and let you know when I will be going live. The rest of you, make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on so that you can join in on the live chat where hopefully we're talking about a Buccaneers 3-0 start. But it's time to get into some predictions. You guys in the live chat right now, start dropping your player, your bold, and your score predictions in there. I will get to those at the very end of the show. My bold prediction for this one, both running backs hit pay dirt. I talked about it being my key, but Rachaad White and Bucky Irving have to be huge parts of this game plan for the offense. They both have the ability to house one if they get in space, and I expect that to be a focal point for Liam Cohen, and they will each have some explosive plays. I'm not sure if either of them score on a rushing touchdown, but with their involvement, I expect at least one, maybe both, to break off a 20-plus yard play and potentially wind up in the end zone because of it. Godwin has 2. Evans has 2. Jalen has 1. Time to get these running backs on the scoreboard. And look, for those of you that watched Thursday's episode of Inside the 813, that's a weekly show that I do over at the 813.tv with my guy, Rock Riley. He talked about it on this week's show. Rachaad is usually the easygoing guy, always smiling, joking around, having a great time, having fun in the locker room. He's not that guy right now. Rachaad White is not smiling. He's not happy. This is the game where he gets that swagger back and we see him smiling from ear to ear. And it starts with heavy involvement early in the game to set the tone for the offense against one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL. My player of the game prediction, give me Jordan Whitehead. He's going to continue to be the tone setter on the back end of the defense without Antoine Winfield Jr. on the field. He has led the team in tackles in each of the first 2 weeks, and he's going, here's your bonus bold. Whitehead is going to get his first takeaway of the season this week. He had one slip right through his arms in Detroit. That's not going to happen again. He wants that play back, and he's going to make up for it this week against Denver. Nix has 2 interceptions in each game this year, and I don't mean he's averaging 2 per game, like he had 3 in one and one of the other. No, 2 games, 2 interceptions in each game. And he has started to get a little salty with the media after the loss last week to the Pittsburgh Steelers. A reporter asked him to break down one of the interceptions, and he flat out said, yeah, I threw it to the other team and they caught it. That was it. An early takeaway by this Buccaneers defense is going to get in the head of Bo Nix and mess with him for the rest of the game. Whitehead is going to be flying all over the field as he always does, but we're talking first drive by Denver. Whitehead is going to have a big splash play to get the defense fired up for this one. As for the score predictions, I texted Evan right before the show, asked him if he wanted to change his score prediction at all. He is going with the Buccaneers 23, Broncos 17. Doesn't have the Bucs covering the spread, but he does have the Bucs moving to 3-0 on the season. I see this game going a little bit differently. Denver has had a lot of problems getting their run game going as it is. That's not going to get any better against the Buccaneers this week, which means it's squarely on the shoulders of Bo Nix. I don't think Bo Nix has it in him at this stage of his career to beat out a Todd Bowles defense that's going to be ready for him. I see the Bucs winning this one comfortably. Give me the Bucs 24, Denver 13. Going to jump into the chat now, see what you guys are saying as far as bold predictions, player predictions. Scotty J says, Justin School, 0 sacks allowed. Oh my goodness, Scotty J, how I hope you are right on that one. We got Insider David in the chat. Bucky versus Nix. Bucky scores 2 touchdowns. Nix throws 2 picks. Mike in the chat says 450 plus yards of offense, 5 touchdowns, 3 passing, 2 rushing. Says the Bucs win 38-12. We got HBK in the chat saying 40-0. You're calling a 40 burger for the Bucs offense and then a shutout for the defense. That's bold in and of itself. We got Narav in the chat saying 73-20. Scotty J says 31-3. HBK says, James, we're going to be 3-0 this Sunday, and we will beat the Eagles 4-0 and make Devin White regret how he played us last year. This year is going to be good for the Bucs. Devin White's probably not even going to play in that game against the Buccaneers. Took 2 weeks for the Eagles to regret signing him. Sam in the chat says White and Irving feast 31-9 Bucs. Richard says Jake Camarda, a 70+ yard punt. Boy, wouldn't that be nice? I'll take a 47-yard punt at this point. Camarda, get it together, man. The Bucs are going to be looking for a replacement here. Ben in the chat says this is a trap game. I'm feeling it will be a shocking loss. Broncos come back and win by a field goal. I am concerned about the trap game. I wrote about it for the 813.tv. It's real easy to look past a bad Broncos team, look ahead to the Eagles, then you have the Falcons, then the Saints, then the Falcons again. They have a gauntlet coming up on the other side of this game against the Broncos. They're only human. But that's something else that Rock talked about on Inside the 813. He said, I believe he mentioned Zion McCollum. Said, I don't even know who we play next week. All he's focused on is the Denver Broncos. That seems to be the mentality for this defense. And that's what you want to hear. These guys shouldn't know who they play next week. The sole focus is get a win against the Denver Broncos. Chris in the chat says Denver isn't scoring a touchdown. Second and fun, says 40-12. HBK says Baker 4 touchdowns. Mike has 2 of them. 40-0 win and 44-17 win over the Eagles. We'll get the Eagles predictions next week, but that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Again, please make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel with the notifications turned on so you know when I'm going live. I will not be watching the game live. I will watch on a tape delay. My son's hockey games take precedent over the Bucs games, but I will dive into it as fast as possible and get this live up and running as quickly as I can Sunday evening. Make sure that you're following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. No ads, no hashtags, just one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.